Hello, everyone, and welcome to another demo pack session at Azure Community Conference. I hope you all are having a great time at the conference and learning new technologies and new stuff around Microsoft Cloud and further. With that, let's just get started. Let's see what we have in stores in this session. So I'm going to talk about modern virtual machines management in Azure. So you must have seen a lot of new enhancements around Azure Compute Services, how you can deploy big size virtual machines and for different kind of objectives and workloads. I'm going to take a step further and I'm going to talk about how you can modernize the operations. Because once your VMs are in production, you need to have a solid management and operations strategy to make sure you have the best uptime and you are getting the best out of Azure Compute Services. So focus of this session is going to be around the post deployment time of compute services. We are going to take a look at how you can have a thorough management and operations strategy for your virtual machines in Azure. I'm going to talk about a new service called Azure Automanage, which is brand new announcement in last Ignite, and it's still in preview at the moment at the time of the recording. So we are going to have a lot of fun. We are going to see how we can modernize the management of virtual machines in Azure in general. My name is Amit Malik. I'm the Director of Technology at Spectra Systems. Spectra Systems, we are a cloud solutions company focused on Microsoft Cloud, and we have our own products which are used by various Microsoft partners and Microsoft as well. So I focus on pretty much anything and everything around Microsoft Cloud. These days, my focus is mainly around infra and apps, along with data and AI with DevOps. So I've been working on a lot of stuff around how we can integrate DevOps with data and AI solutions, calling it machine learning operations, MLOps. I've written a bunch of books around Microsoft Cloud technologies in the last few years. Prior to Spectra Systems, I worked for Microsoft as an Azure consultant, and I typically write my blog post on my website, amitmalik.net. So feel free to connect me over LinkedIn, Twitter, or follow my blog. With that, let's just get started. Let's see what we have in our agenda for this session. So the first point we're going to discuss is why. Why do we need modernized operations? What's wrong with the current solutions? Then we are going to talk about what is Azure Automanage, a demo. Since the service is in preview, we are going to look at how we should be careful when deploying preview services and what are the limitations and stuff around that. And in the end, we will have some time for Q&A. So with that, let's just get started on the why part. So cloud adoption, a general framework how you can adopt cloud technologies for your company's IT infrastructure and applications while making sure you are getting the best value out of it. So where exactly customers feel challenged when they look at moving to cloud? What are the key challenges that they see? So typically, you would have your own data centers where you would have your own Windows, Linux servers. You would be managing virtual machines, hypervisors, different hypervisors, SAN storage, network, and so on. So a full-fledged data center you manage. Now you want to move those virtual machines or those servers to cloud. Some of the challenges comes around having a team which understands the Azure or in general cloud computing at a level where they can manage a production workload at a big scale without really causing any issues, plus also making sure that they get the benefit of the cloud technologies. So typically customer face challenges that they need to have a new team to manage their cloud infrastructure. The existing teams are not skilled with cloud, or they need to have them skilled. They need to like train them, or they need to go through a lot of unlearning and relearning processes. So that's the first challenge we have seen customer facing, that we can get the VMs moving. No problem. We can use Azure Migrate, Azure Site Recovery, and things like that to move the VMs easily to cloud. But what after that? Our teams do not know how to effectively update the VMs running in cloud. Our teams do not know what should be the right backup strategy or what should be the right security strategy. We do on-prem. We have a bunch of things deployed on-prem. We are using DPM or any other backup solution on-prem. We are having our own monitoring strategy where we have SCOM deployed. We don't know if these things are going to work in cloud. And if these things are going to work in cloud, what's the value I'm going to get? Why should I move to cloud? So these are some questions customer face that number one, I need to retrain my team or build a new team. Number two, what is going to be the value add if I do the things exact same way that I'm doing today? If you just do the exact same things, all you're doing is just getting rid of your hardware management. And that's not enough for a lot of customers. That is not enough motivation to move to cloud. There's not enough value by just eliminating hardware. So those are some questions IT managers faces when they try to move to cloud. Typically, when you have teams who have been working on legacy technologies, they try to keep carry that knowledge while they do things in cloud as well. Like they try to do the same WCS based update management, they try to do some sort of similar backup management. So you end up in a scenario where you are in cloud, but you are not really realizing the true value of it because you're still carrying your legacy operations strategies, your legacy operations management tools and processes in cloud. And sometimes even with dedicated teams, like cloud changes every day. Like every you go to azure.microsoft.com and go to the blog section, you would see that every day there are new updates. Every day there are new things being announced. So today I'm saying something, tomorrow it may not be true. Tomorrow it may be a completely different thing. So cloud is also changing every single day, and every single day there are enhancements coming. There are ways the way things are done are being changed completely. Even with dedicated team, keeping up with that pace of change in cloud is difficult. Like if I'm the operation manager, do I focus on managing my existing operations and making sure everything runs smooth and I'm getting the best value, or do I go and keep looking what Microsoft is introducing every day and make sure I get the best value out of that those things as well? To answer your question, both. You are supposed to do both because the true value of cloud is not realized unless you are using the best practices defined by the cloud provider, Microsoft in this case. So if you're just moving VMs and not following the cloud adoption framework best practices, then you are not getting the best value out of it. Then all you are doing is just running the VMs on someone else's hardware. So as an IT manager, these are the challenges people face when they go and position we should look at cloud adoption. That why should we do it unless there is a true value to it? So in this session we are going to talk about how Azure's operations management best practices can answer to this why question, that this is why you should move to cloud, this is why you should run your VMs in cloud, this is how it's going to help you. Moving further on this why section, when we talk about virtual machines in cloud, what are the traditional thing we saw was why should we move? There's no value to it unless we are doing something modern, which is SaaS. A lot of companies have already moved Exchange workloads to Office 365, and that's a true value you can see. You do not have to manage those Exchange servers anymore. You do not have to worry about those DAC configurations or your disaster recovery or even your backup solutions. Everything is fully managed by Microsoft. You just use the email service. That's the true goal, or that's the ideal place any IT manager would want their applications to be in, where they just use the applications and everything else just happens under the hood without them worrying about anything. But not everything can be moved to SaaS. There are LOB applications. There are custom applications that are developed by enterprises for their own purpose. There are applications which are legacy, which were built years back on legacy technologies and they are not upgraded. So that LOB applications remains a challenge all the time. Like if you're using like Microsoft Active Directory or other server operating systems and server applications such as SQL Server and so on, you have a lot of ways to move to PaaS and SaaS services where you see the true value. But for LOB applications, there is always a challenge that what's going to happen to my legacy app after I move to cloud? Is it going to work the exact same way? Am I going to have some benefits by moving it to cloud, or it's just for the sake of moving it to cloud? So one of the typical recommendation is you have a legacy application, just go and refactor it and put it into Azure App Services, put it into PaaS so that you don't have to manage servers anymore. But that's not an option for everyone. Not everyone can refactor their applications for various reasons, such as all companies do not own the source code, or they do not have the expertise, or they don't just want to go and touch base the source code, which was last updated 15 years back. Because if something breaks, people may not have the right skills to fix that. And finally, don't fix something if it's not broken, the general principle. So these are some key reasons that why people don't want to move to PaaS and SaaS for their LOB applications. Then the only option left is move your LOB applications to cloud as is into VMs, lift and shift. And that's where the original challenge comes into it. What's the value behind it? Customer thinks that it's just that I'm running my VM in someone else's hardware, but everything else is same. I'm still responsible for its management. I'm still responsible for making sure that it's the security updates are always up to date. It's secure. It is being backed up. So those operations things still comes with me as is. The only thing I'm removing is hardware management. And then is it worth it? So those are typical challenges customers face when they make a decision of moving to cloud for their virtual machines. So we have got IaaS, we have got PaaS. What are we missing? How we can address these challenges? PaaS and SaaS success story is that's already a success story. You move to PaaS and SaaS and you have peaceful sleep in your nights because you're not asked to wake up again because something is down and you don't have to worry about those backups or de-address. Like Microsoft takes care of everything. IaaS, you are still responsible for pretty much everything other than hardware. You are still responsible for making sure your OS is up to date. So, how we can bridge this gap between this IaaS and PaaS SaaS solutions? How we can bring something which can realize the value of moving to IaaS to customers having LOB in virtual machines? So, the answer is hands-free management. Once the VM is moved, let Microsoft manage it for repetitive day-to-day operational tasks. So essentially, once the VM is in Azure, it should just work flawless and it should just be managing itself on its own without really any additional intervention, any additional tool set, or any additional software purchase. Everything just should happen on its own. Yes, if there are exceptions, like we have team who can look into it. Like you would have your own team who would manage them. But those daily to daily repetitive tasks around security, monitoring, backups, updates, all these operations things should be just invisible. You shouldn't have to worry about those anymore. That's what is missing, and that's what is required as well. So today, if you go and tell an IT manager that you can move your virtual machines to this service, and after that, the management is taken care by the service provider, they will see the value in that. So that's the value we are trying to discuss in this session, where how we can eliminate those day-to-day operations tasks in Azure for virtual machines. Now, before we eliminate those operations and everything, we need to look at what are the things that we need to do. So Microsoft have already put together this cloud adoption framework, best practices for virtual machines, which talks about if you're running VMs in Azure, these are 10, 20 things you should be doing to make sure your VMs are managed as per the best practices and to make sure that they are healthy, secure, and everything. So if I go to that link, this takes me to Cloud Adoption Framework documentation, which are the recommended guidelines at how you should move to cloud and how you should manage. Under best practices for server management, there are various recommendations. You should be looking at good security story. You should be looking at good backup and DR story, monitoring story, configurations, updates, automation, and so on. And finally, the governance. So once you migrate, there are various pillars of operations management you need to be looking at. So cloud adoption framework acts as a guidance to you where you can follow the cloud adoption framework and you can be sure that you are managing your virtual machines the right way in Azure. So this includes setting up various services, like for example, if I move forward with respect to what all things are recommended. So it is recommended that you have log analytics for your monitoring and everything. Then there are planning consideration against each of those services. So this documentation helps you with making sure that your virtual machines are managed the right way. If I go to ongoing cloud operations, there are various things around, for example, updates, how you should be handling the updates of your virtual machines. Under monitoring, if I go, how you should be doing the monitoring of your virtual machines, what are the various tools you should be using. So there are a lot of best practices given here, how you should be doing the RBAC, role-based access control. But that's again, all of this is a lot of work. Like someone from your team needs to go through all the documentations, needs to make sure it is planned right, update management, change tracking, and everything is configured the right way. And once it's configured and deploy, your team is again responsible for making sure that it is kept the same way throughout your production lifecycle. Like there should not be any changes. All the time, the VM should be following these best practices. So again, lot of work. Again, you need to have your team who are going to do these things. You need to have skilled professionals. So you need to build a new team or you need to retrain your team. And if you already have team who is doing all these things with legacy technologies, it's very tough to do that unlearning and relearning process. So again, a set of challenges. While Microsoft is telling these are the things you should do, someone needs to do that. Again, the people factor comes into place. So let's see what's the solution to that. So the solution to that is Azure Automanage. It's a brand new service launched in last Ignite conference, still in preview. Preview means it is not yet generally available. That means if you use it for production, you will not get SLA and everything at this point of time yet. You may not get the best support. It will be on a best effort basis. So till the time it's not GA, like I won't recommend it using in production, but I would recommend that go and try it out so that you are ready to deploy it in production as soon as it goes GA. So what is it? Azure Auto Manage. As the name says, it automates the management of virtual machines? Kind of, yes. So the best practices that we looked at in cloud adoption framework, Azure Automation Auto Manage does those best practices for you automatically. So the people factor where you need to train someone to do these best practices, and then you need to have someone who is going to monitor these best practices against any of the changes that you do in your infrastructure. Both of those factors are now eliminated because Microsoft is going to do that for you through this service called Azure Auto Manage. So you get your VMs in Azure, you enable Azure Auto Manage for that, and then you forget about the operations management of those virtual machines. Microsoft will take care of everything. It doesn't mean that you do not need to have a infrastructure management team anymore. You still need to have that, like because monitoring is still going to generate alerts and someone needs to look into those alerts and act on that. Update management is going to automatically take care of update installation, but someone needs to still verify that everything is working well and there are no updates failing. So there is still IT teams involvements are required here, but the benefit is they do not need to go and do these configurations across hundreds of servers and more, and they do not need to Monitor servers against these best practices because Microsoft is going to do that for you. If you enable Azure Automate Manage for your virtual machines, all these services that you see in this slide, these services are enabled automatically. So starting with backup, as soon as you enable Auto Manage, the backup service is enabled and your virtual machine starts to get backed up on the schedule that you define. So if something goes wrong, you can always restore from the backup. Log analytics is the centralized log management and monitoring solution. So you can have various solutions managed to log analytics, such as updates and so on. So you can that log analytics is automatically deployed and configured with Automanage. Configuration management for your DSC, desired state configurations, or any of those similar things that you need to make sure in your virtual machines. Change tracking, inventory. So any of the change tracking, anything changed in your virtual machine is tracked against the defined baselines. Automation account to do all these things, because in order to, if something happens, like let's say if you go and disable the backup, Azure Automanage is going to re-enable the backup for the virtual machines. So automation accounts are used for doing all those automation stuff. Update management. This is going to be around your operating system updates. Monitoring, any alerts, CPU alerts, or VM health monitoring, VM agent health monitoring, all those things comes under monitoring. And finally, the security center, which includes Azure Security Center onboarding, that is Defender ATP, that is Microsoft Defender for servers now. So you get those anti-malware and those antivirus capabilities along with Security Center's recommendations. So these are the services which are available in Azure Automanage today. So as soon as you enable Azure Automanage for a VM, you get these services enabled, deployed, configured automatically for you without doing any additional configurations. So a lot of services are participating in Azure Automanage, as you can see. But when it goes GA, when the service goes generally available, this list may be increased. So it's not restricted to these services. These are the services available at this point of time. But in actual, this list will keep on getting increasing, and this will, like, it's going to be a ongoing process. So how that helps, if we go back to the discussion we had in the starting of the session, that how cloud is changing every day, and you need to have someone who is keeping a track of the changes, of the new features that are being introduced, and making sure that we are, using them to get the best out of Azure. Automanage is going to be doing that job for you. So if there's an enhancement in backup, Automanage is going to get those enhancements as well. And your virtual machines configurations or backup configurations will be updated to those enhancements. So essentially, you don't have to watch for updates anymore, that what's new coming. Automanage is going to take care of those things for you with respect to operations management only. The list of services, like I said, is going to get increased. So tomorrow, if Microsoft launches another service for virtual machines management or any other operations related features, that will get added automatically. Obviously, it may take its own time, like generally available, and those like deployment rings, that duration delays can be there, but eventually you will get the when the service is production ready. So I want to clarify another thing again. You still can do all these things manually for your virtual machines. There is no issue with that, and that's how you can do that's how teams have been doing it so far. It's just that auto manages hides those implementation from you, and you do not have to do any of those configurations. Under the hood, it's going to go and deploy the resources and configure the resources. That's all. It's not going to use some new service to do backup. It's still going to use Azure backup only, but it's just that you don't have to do that anymore, and you don't have to worry about that anymore. So how it helps Azure Automation? What's the benefit? So reduce cost by automating Windows Server management. All those labor hours are now eliminated because you do not have to ask your team to do these configurations. You do not have to ask your team to watch to make sure all the future changes are adhering to these recommendations, and all the new servers that you're going to add in future are also following the recommendations. So a lot of money is saved in terms of human resources here, because Microsoft is going to take care of those things for you. Improve workload uptime with optimized operations. With regular backups, regular security updates, regular Windows updates, your workload is going to be in a healthy state at all point of times. Because it is in a healthy state, that means you will not have any downtime caused by any of the misconfigurations or any of the general issues in your infrastructure. Security best practices. So cyber security, cyber threats are a real world problem. And with COVID, they have increased a lot as well. I've had many of my customers seeing attempts of break-in, uh, ransomware related stuff are increasing a lot these days, and it is very important that you are making sure that you have a good tested security strategy, and Automanage is going to take care of that for you. Automanage is going to make sure that the strategy is very well followed and is always at a compliant state. Automatically apply VM best practices at scale. So if you're deploying like 10 VMs, 20 VMs, it may be easy to go and do those configurations manually. But when we're talking about big scale, like hundreds and thousands of VMs, you need a solution which is fully automatic and there's zero manual intervention. So that's where Automanage comes into place. You can enable like Automanage for your entire subscription, and any future VMs which are going to get created will also have those Automanage best practices implemented automatically. So you apply the standard cloud adoption framework best practices at scale without any additional efforts. Well, this is the time for the demo. So let's see this in action. Let me bring up Azure portal here. So I'll refresh. So Automanage is go to Azure portal and search for Automanage. Automanage Azure Virtual Machine best practices over here. You can see it's just in preview. So this is the place where you do pretty much everything around Automanage. So you select your subscription. So I'll give it a second to load. So select your subscription, then refresh. So over here, I have Automanage configured for one virtual machine already. I had done that before this session. Let's see how we enable Automanage. So I'm going to go to click on Enable Automanage. That's the thing. So enable on existing VM. And over here, I can choose the virtual machines on which I want to enable the Automanage. And it automatically shows me all the virtual machines which are eligible. So if you do not see any virtual machines, that means there is something like the virtual machines that you have right now are not supported for Automanage. And some of there are some requirements at the moment in the preview, which we will be discussing in detail. But essentially, you will see a virtual machines here. So let me refresh and let me make sure the virtual machines are actually started, because if the virtual machine is stopped, Automanage cannot be enabled. So let me start these virtual machines and let's wait for a second. Once these virtual machines are started, I will have these eligible, like this one is already enabled to Automanage. So the demo 2 one, I will have listed in my eligible virtual machines. So while the virtual machines get started, let's go and take a look at the further steps. So I'm saying enable on existing VMs. So over here, I choose the virtual machines which I want to enable Automanage on. So within a minute, I should have the virtual machine listed here. So while that comes, let's look at the next options. So configuration profile. So configuration profile is a way for you to customize the Automanage configurations. So we talked about backup, but how frequently do you want to backup? How long do you want to store that backup? all those decisions you make through configuration profiles. So let's take a look at the configuration profile. So there are essentially two types of configuration profile which are by default available. So these are the default configuration profile. There's one for dev test and there is one for production. If you look at it, the core difference between dev test and production is backup and insights monitoring. So typically dev test VMs, you wouldn't want to back them up and add additional cost, or you wouldn't want to watch them for alerts and stuff like that. So they do not include the backup and the insights monitoring by default, whereas the production one includes insights and backup. So if you want to follow Microsoft's guidelines just by default, you do not have to configure anything. Just choose, do you want dev test or production, and say select. Automatically, those productions guidelines will be applied. However, if you want, you can create your own preferences. So before that, let's take a look at like what all options are here. So this is Azure Insights monitoring for virtual machines is going to monitor the performance and health of your VMs. Backup, by default, the backup is going to do the backup at 12 p.m. UTC time, and it's going to have like instant recovery for 2 days, and it's going to retain it for 180 days. This is the default configuration. Similarly, for everything, you can see what it's going to do. Like for anti-malware, it's going to scan every Saturday at 1:20. That's the specific time. I think it means 2 a.m. So these are some settings which are by default provided by Microsoft to you. For many of these things, you do not have ability to like customize stuff. But when you create a new preference, let's say I want to create a new preference, and I'm going to call it like, you know, like enterprise management best practices. Choose a resource group where you want to store this configuration profile. And then you have two settings here. You have settings around backup, like what time do you want to back up every day, at what time zone, and how long do you want to store the instant snapshot, and how long do you want to retain it. So very simple configurations you can do. Weekly backup will be coming soon. Similarly, for anti-malware, you can choose when do you want to scan, what time do you want to enable, is there anything you want to exclude especially. So these are the only two areas where you can have your own custom profiles. For others, you have to follow the as per the Microsoft best practices. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be remain like this. Soon enough, we may have more configuration options for other services as well. But as of now, from a custom preference standpoint, only backup and anti-malware settings are customizable. So I can create a custom preference and say, okay, I want to enable this. In advance, so in order to deploy all these things, there is an automation account or auto manage account is required. So you can create a new auto manage account, which is nothing but a managed identity in Azure. So you can use one of the existing one, or you can choose a create a new one. So I can say create a new one and give a specific resource group, or I can choose the default option that is available here. Let's go back to the virtual machines and let's see if I have the VMs listed here. So I've got my demo2 VM, which is now running, and I can select it. So select the VM you want to enable auto manage on, choose the configuration profile from default, or create a new configuration profile as per your need, and choose an automation account or create a new auto manage account. That's all, 3-step process, and enable. It's going to take some time to enable this auto manage functionality. Like typically it might take like 30 minutes to 1 hour. But once it is enabled, over here, you will see the virtual machine name, and you will see that the status is configured. So this virtual machine is automatically, this virtual machine is auto managed by the Azure Automanage service. So while this happens, we will take a look at the existing VM, which is already configured for auto manage. So let's wait for refreshing. So the demo one VM was already configured before this session. We configured this VM in this session, and it is now in progress. Like I said, it might take some time. If you need to disable auto manage, just select the VM and say disable auto manage. If you disable auto manage, it won't go and delete things. It will just that it will stop watching it further. But the existing configurations are going to remain same. Now let's take a look at the auto-managed virtual machine. So if I go to VMs and that auto-managed demo one, so if I scroll down here under operations and monitoring, I can see a lot of options like change tracking, for example. All these things will be enabled by default because Azure Automanage took care of it. Like I can see dependency agent was added. These are the changes being done to the virtual machines. I can go to inventory and see the inventory of this virtual machines, like with respect to software. These are the applications installed, files, and so on. So all these things are enabled by Azure Automanage. Here, if I go to logs, this is the log analytics workspace. I can go and search for logs. Like I can go and search for heartbeat and so on. So all those things are enabled automatically over here. Like if I go to insights, I will have the fully map built up, like this talking to these ports on these services. I can go and look at the performance metrics and I can drill down into them. So a lot of these options are now available with auto manage automatically. If I go to backup, I will be seeing that backup is also automatically enabled, and I can see that it's already being backed up once. I can do more backup and so on. So if I go in, for example, if I go and remove this, in order to have this log analytics, update management, and so on. So if I go to guest plus host updates, over here, I will be able to go to update management. This is around security updates and so on. I can see which all updates are missing. Like these many updates are missing at the moment. Like Azure Auto Manage will take care of getting these installed and so on, but I can review it from here. If I go and remove any of these settings from the VM, because in the Auto Manage is also doing nothing but going and doing these settings. If I change any of these settings, and then the virtual machine gets into a state called configuration drift, something changed from the best practices. Automanage is going to correct that. So Automanage is going to correct that for you, and it's going to reinstall the agent or it's going to redo the configurations that are required. So that is a very high-level demo for Azure Automanage. So the way you manage is you search for Automanage here and go to that Automanage service page, or you can go to all services as well and find it from here. And I should have the second virtual machine is still in progress for me. So while it takes time, let's see how we do auto manage while we create a new virtual machine. So the process for doing auto manage for a new virtual machine is actually same as existing VMs. So if I go to demo 3, for example, and give it a name, let's choose East US. The service is not available in all the regions here. There are only specific regions which are available. And give it a username password. So I'm creating a new VM. As of now, there is no way to choose auto manage configurations over here in management, but I'm hoping that soon we will have that option here. Like you can choose, do you want to auto manage? Yes, no. But as of now, the option is you create the virtual machines. And once the virtual machine is created, you go and enable auto manage on that virtual machine the way we just did for the existing VMs. So that's the process right now, even for the new VMs as well as the existing VMs. But I'm hoping that soon we will, in the management section of that virtual machine creation wizard, we will have an option to enable auto manage right then and there as well. As of now, as soon as the virtual machine is created, we will have an option to go to the auto manage option from here, which takes us to the regular auto manage screen. So while this is all cool, how do we make sure that we are doing auto manage at scale for virtual machines? When we have hundreds and virtual machines, we are creating new VMs every day, deleting VMs. Well, the good old Azure policy is your friend there. So if I go to Azure policy and if I go to definitions, You can search for Automanage here. So enable Automanage, Azure Virtual Machine Best Practices, and I can say assign this policy. So basically, this policy will make sure any VMs which are in the subscription or in the scope that you choose while applying this policy, or any future VMs which are going to get created in that scope, will have Automanage enabled. So this manual step to do Automanage is now eliminated with Azure Policy. So I can choose a scope. I can say I want to do it at a subscription level, or I can want to do it at a resource group level. Let's say I want to do it as a resource group level, and then any exclusion like don't include this resource group. And if I go next, fill in the parameter values, which is nothing but choose the automation account, Automanage account, and the profile, which profile you want to apply. In case of remediation, enable Automanage, and that's all. As soon as I apply this policy, it's going to wash out for any VMs which does not have Azure Automanage already enabled. Azure Policy is going to go and enable the Azure Automanage for those VMs. So all you need to do is just create this policy, very simple. Choose the scope where you want this to be applicable. Give the parameter, which choose the Automanage account and the config profile. Under remediation, enable the remediation that please enable Automanage for VMs whenever it's not enabled. Manage entity location, you can choose where do you want to store that managed entity, which is required for doing those Automanage configurations. And that's pretty much all. So this is how you enable Azure Automanage at scale. So with this, like any future VMs, I don't have to go and manually enable Azure Automanage. Policy is going to do that job for me. The VM is now created. If I say, if I go to this deployment page, over here under next steps, I have this option, enable Azure Automanage best practices, and it takes me to the same page where the VM is already selected. I just have to choose the profile and click enable. So the same experience for new virtual machines as well. So that's pretty much all from a demo standpoint. And we saw that how Azure Automanage helps you. So a quick recap. So essentially, Automanage is a service to automatically onboard the best practices of operations and management for your virtual machines using the Azure services. It automatically configures all the required services such as backup, log analytics, monitoring, and so on as per Microsoft's recommendations. It automatically configures your guest operating system, for example, Windows, as per Microsoft's recommendation with respect to security updates and so on. If there is any change to the configurations, if there is any drift, it will monitor and it will fix that. And you can onboard it using Portal. We looked at the Portal experience for both new VM and existing VM. It's pretty much the same thing. You can use Azure Policy to automatically enable Azure Automanage for virtual machines in a certain resource group or subscription or even management group. You can enable it through PowerShell, or you can enable through any ARM APIs or templates and so on. So like I said, this particular update is as of 20th November. The service is still in preview. It is not generally available, so we do not recommend it running in production. However, you can start testing it out and be ready to deploy in production. Azure Automanage is completely free of cost at the moment. There is no cost for the service during the preview. Once it goes GA, like it may have its own pricing, but as of now, there is no cost. However, please note that any attached resources such as Azure Backup or Log Analytics is still going to cost money. So only the auto manage functionality are free of cost at the moment, but other things are still going to cost money. So be careful even if you test it. So when it goes to GA, like we may have more and more services also participating. Like for example, Azure Site Recovery, which can do Azure to Azure DR, is not available yet. So that may be coming soon. So the number of services, number of configuration options are going to keep on changing all the time with the service as Azure grows. At this time, it only supports Windows virtual machines. Linux VMs are not supported for Automanage at the moment. Not available in all regions. I think there are only 5 or 6 regions you can use it during preview. If you remember in the demo, like I didn't see the VM unless I started it. So it's very simple that we need to keep the virtual machines running while we enable Azure Automanage. Obviously, you can go and stop it after that. At this time, it requires specific permissions, like you must have like contributor rights on the resource group of the virtual machine. And if you're creating a new Azure Automanage account, it requires additional permissions on AD and stuff. So if you like, it doesn't support custom roles at the moment. You must have contributor rights, but I'm pretty sure that will be available as it goes to GA. If you have like sandbox subscription through your partner center or CSP accounts, that's not supported at the moment. Only commercial subscriptions are supported. So that brings us to the end of the session on Azure Automanage. So if we look at a recap, there are a lot of questions that IT manager faces when they look at moving VMs to Azure and when they try to determine what is going to be my value add by having these VMs running in Azure. And one of them is mainly around operations that I still need to manage everything. Auto comes to the rescue, and Automanage help you with automatically configuring all the required best practices around operations and monitoring. So it's still going to use the same Azure services for operations, monitoring, and production, security, and so on. However, the only change is you don't have to worry about them anymore. You don't have to configure them anymore. Automanage is going to be taking care of that. So at this time it includes like monitoring insights, it includes backup services, security center onboarding, anti-malware, configuration tracking, inventory tracking, any change tracking that is there. It includes log analytics onboarding for any log centralized logging mechanisms, update management, Windows updates, security updates, and so on. So a lot of these services are participating at the moment, which is automatically taken care by Azure Automanage service for you. Fairly simple to configure, use Azure Portal or any other preferred tool that you want. And most importantly, the service is still in preview. That means it's still not production ready. So we are in the end of the session. If there are any questions, please use the chat window to ask them. And in the end, I would like to thank you, our sponsors, Microsoft and GitHub, primarily. And I would also like to call out the source of this, some of the PowerPoint presentations and the information that you show. So some of this comes from Microsoft Ignite session and Azure Auto-Managed public documentation. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat window, and we will be happy to assist you on that. I would like to thank the communities involved in conducting this event. It's been going wonderful, and I'm pretty sure that you have learned a lot from the event, and you will continue to learn throughout the event. Some more communities to thank, and in the end, thank you very much from my side for joining today for this session. I hope you learned about how important virtual machine management is and how Azure Auto is going to help you. This was Amit Malik. My social handles and the blog address is there on the slide, so feel free to connect to me through any of the preferred method. And thank you very much. Again, have a great rest of your event.